Hi, my name's Josh Spencer. I'm a staff architect with VMware End User Computing Technical Marketing. Today I'm here to talk with you about some technologies that will allow you to modernize your Horizon deployment. Now, VMware helped pioneer the VDI space, and we've been providing VDI technologies for well over a decade at this point. Now, this is a slide that I used to use with customers back in the 2010-2011 timeframe. It's a little bit nostalgic, but it's also still very relevant. Back then, we were talking about modernizing the desktop by isolating the different components of a traditional physical PC, breaking those apart and managing them independently with different technologies. Once we had them isolated and managed, we could bring those back to a central point. Typically, in these days, it was a vSphere on-premises data center. Of course, today we have infrastructure platforms in the cloud, on-premises, and hybrid as well. But the idea is once we move everything to a central managed location, then we can broker access to these reconstituted desktops to end users, and they could consume these desktops on any sort of endpoint computing device that they preferred. Now, today, the concepts, the model that I just talked through really hasn't changed. What has changed is the technologies that are available to you. These have matured and sophisticated quite a bit. Horizon provides a variety of rapid automated provisioning capabilities, again, on premises or within the cloud, real-time application delivery using a number of technologies, and some very granular control for IT over the overall user experience while being very seamless and easy to consume from the end users. So all of these technologies are comprised within Horizon, Horizon provisioning, app volumes, dynamic environment manager, and more. Now, the premise for this session is to really talk about how we get from some of these legacy components. As I mentioned, Horizon's been around for a long time. There are some legacy technologies in there that are being deprecated and replaced with modern alternatives. So the items that you see here in purple are things that when you make the move from Horizon 7 to Horizon 8, these have been removed from the platform. Now, the items in green, specifically Composer and the associated persistent disks, still exist in the initial Horizon 8 release. So here you can see when Horizon 8 version 2006 was released early last year, Composer was deprecated. Some of these alternative technologies were put in place for the removed components. It's really important to note that as you move down that path and you get into Horizon 8 2012 and later, Composer has been completely removed. Now, for those that are already running a version of Horizon 7, something older than 7.13, rest assured, there's no need to panic. You do have some time here to take your time migrating. We've released Horizon 7.13, and 7.13 actually will have support up until October of 2022. You can see a KB article here with more detail. And the point there is that you can continue to use your Composer technology, your persistent disks, and take your time making a plan to make your migration smooth and successful. Now, to help with this process, we have made instant clone provisioning available to all Horizon 7.13 and Horizon 8 customers. So whether you're using standard, advanced, or enterprise, you now have instant clone provisioning available to you, again, allowing you to work through that migration early on and then make a smooth transition to Horizon 8 and later. Now, I want to encourage all of you as you're thinking about making the migration to Horizon 8 and some of these modern technologies to engage with VMware. We're here to help. If you take a look at techzone.vmware.com, and I'll be referencing some different articles on that throughout this session, there are a number of ways that you can interact with us there. You can provide feedback, you can communicate on the communities, a number of things, and we really do think this is an important topic. We are listening, and we want to make sure that we are capturing what's working for you, what we need to improve so that we can continue to refine the guidance on the assets that we're going to be talking about here today. Now, as you start thinking about modernizing, you're going to see there are a lot of tools available to you. Here you can see things like VMware Horizon Instant Clones, which I mentioned are available to all Horizon customers, Dynamic Environment Manager, right? These are VMware technologies. We also have partnered with Microsoft to ensure very seamless and well-integrated solutions when you incorporate things like FSLogix and folder redirection. So the point here is that you have a lot of options, and depending on the model or models that you want to build for your end users, there are different combinations of technologies you'll want to use. So let's just talk about a couple of these for a moment. Dynamic Environment Manager is really key to this overall migration process. Whether you want to just do a one-time migration from, say, a legacy component like persona management to something modern, Dynamic Environment Manager can help you, and maybe you never use it again after that. At the same time, if you want to take advantage of Dynamic Environment Manager's vast capabilities, from managing users and computer objects to all sorts of enhancements, privilege elevation and application blocking, along with all the profile work, well, you have that option as well. So what we've done here is split apart the Dynamic Environment Manager product into a standard and an enterprise version. Now, enterprise is the same old DEM that everybody has been using, that's been included with Horizon Enterprise for some time, or could be purchased standalone. Dynamic Environment Manager Standard Edition is essentially a somewhat limited set of capabilities that provides you all the things that you'll need to do to migrate away from something like persona management or persistent disks. So this Standard Edition is now included with all Horizon SKUs. So Horizon Standard, Advanced customers, whether you're running version 7, version 8, it really doesn't matter. DEM Standard is now available to you. And again, you can use it for one-time migrations or as a new platform for managing your user profiles moving forward. Now, App Volumes is another technology that we should touch on, and it really helps with a couple of different key use cases. So first, I want to mention that App Volumes has been extended to the cloud. So whether you're running on a traditional Horizon on vSphere on premises, or Horizon on vSphere in the cloud, or even Horizon Cloud Service on Microsoft Azure, you're able to take advantage of application distribution and lifecycle management with App Volumes. So one of the great things about this technology is, regardless of your infrastructure platform of choice, or even in a hybrid model, the underlying agent is the same. So you get the same feature set, the same capabilities for your application packages and that lifecycle management regardless. Now, there are some nuances when we get into things like the writable volumes. So for example, you might choose to use a writable volume to do something like provide user-installed application capabilities, where we capture the apps that an end user is installing to the writable volume so that we can persist it between non-persistent desktop sessions. That's a real value add and sort of a differentiator in the market for the writable volumes. At the same time, you might just choose to use DEM or even FSLogix. And when we move to Azure, it's important to note that the writable volumes are not available there, but all the other options are. So if you want to continue using DEM, folder redirection, FSLogix, or some combination of those, those will allow you to move between vSphere and Azure environments. Now, I mentioned FSLogix a couple of times, and I want to just touch on a couple of points here. One is that FSLogix provides two options for you. You can have a profile container, or you can have an office container. The profile essentially uses a filter driver and redirects the entire profile down to a VHD, whereas the office container focuses just on those office cache repositories. So things like OneDrive cache, Outlook OST, just as a couple of examples. So it doesn't really matter which you choose to utilize. These both seamlessly integrate with Horizon. We've even published a couple of assets out on techzone.vmware.com that show you the integrations and give you a little bit of a head start if you're looking to go down this path. Now, as I mentioned, there are a number of tools at your disposal as you're thinking about modernizing, and sometimes even within something as simple as, how do I provision my desktops? So a couple of things that we want to call out here. It's important if you're using something like a persistent desktop. And when we say persistent, we mean a desktop that lasts for some extended period of time. Think of it like months or years, much like a physical PC. So in this case, it's important that we're using full clone persistent desktops, right? Full clone provisioning. We can complement that full clone provisioning with technologies like DEM or folder redirection if we want to still have some abstraction in the case that we do need to replace that desktop. Now, when we get into semi-persistent desktops, these are desktops that aren't single use, but we're maybe only going to use them for days or weeks at a time, right? A little bit longer than typical. So in this case, we want to move to instant clone provisioning. Now, many of you may be familiar with linked clones, again, the Composer technology, and you can continue to use that. But remember, as we move toward Horizon 8, that technology will be deprecated and removed. So instant clone is really the way we want to go. And again, some optional technologies that we can add on here. Now, when you get to non-persistent desktops, this is where we really gain the efficiencies for IT administrators of the overall lifecycle management of the desktops, the applications, etc. But it's really important that we give our end users a great user experience, right? They want to have that persistent look and feel, so they think they're using their own dedicated desktop every time, even though we're deleting and recreating that virtual machine. So in this case, we'll use instant clones, and then we can layer on things like DEM, folder redirection, maybe the Office container with FSLogix, depending on the particular use case and how much persistence you need to give that given set of end users. Now, a key takeaway here, if you remember one slide from this presentation, we do have some really excellent resources that can help you through this journey. You're not alone on this. So the VMware Workspace ONE and Horizon reference architecture is something that every Horizon or Workspace ONE customer should be aware of. This is a comprehensive guide, a technical guide that will show you how to go from small scale, single site deployments all the way up to massive multi-site deployments. It accounts for disaster recovery, high availability, all kinds of things. So again, something that everybody should be aware of. Next, we have the Managing User Experience with VMware Horizon. Now, this asset was published to really help lay a foundation to all the different technologies, all the options, much more formal definitions of things like persistent desktops and semi-persistent and things like that, the underlying components of a profile. And the goal of this document is to really break apart all of that and show you how you can then assemble with the different technologies, different models to address different use cases. It's really important to note that not every customer will be able to build a single desktop model that just works for all of their end users. We'll often find power users, standard users, this niche group of users that needs to install their own software, whatever it may be. And we have different models outlined that'll help you address whatever your needs are. Now, the last one is this Modernizing VDI for New Horizon. Now, this document was sort of the premise of creating this session. And what we do within this document is break down a number of specific migration scenarios. So we'll make some assumptions like you're using persona management and you want to migrate away from persona management because it's being deprecated, because it's a legacy technology, and you want to move to some new modern model. And you can see here, we list a number of different models that are available to you, and we'll actually step you through the steps to get from the legacy solution to the modern alternative. So as you can see here, the two key focuses within this document are moving away from persona management and away from persistent disks, both to modern alternatives. Now, throughout the different scenarios, you'll see in some cases we'll reuse your existing linked clone pools. And in other scenarios, it might be easier to actually just go ahead and move to a brand new pool or even an instant clone pool. And we'll show you and walk you through the pros and cons of those different migration scenarios. Now, we do cover, in some cases, manual, right? Step by step, here's what you would need to do. Some automation, so how you can kind of automate some of these steps. And even in some scenarios, we can do in-place upgrades where we move from one technology to the other while the end user is using the environment with no noticeable interruption to their work. Some of these scenarios do rely on custom code, and we've provided some code samples out on GitHub, linked within the document that you can use and tailor to your own purposes. Finally, be aware as you start down this path, all of these scenarios are going to require some level of refresh or recomposing of your existing pools to get the new technologies built into them. Now, I want to talk for just a moment about this sort of preferred or ideal model when we're dealing with non-persistent. And I know it looks like a busy graphic here, but I want to step you through and show you how much control IT gets at each level, right? The OS, the applications, the persona, while giving end users a seamless experience that looks and feels like their own desktop. So we start with FSLogix Office Container. I mentioned this earlier, and it's really ideal for your end users that need to use Office 365. There's a lot of cache data that might come along with that, from Teams to OneDrive, Outlook. And the idea is that we can cache all that information on this disposable VHD that attaches real time. And essentially, because it's considered disposable because it can recreate itself from the cloud version, it's very simple. We don't have to think about backing up or migrating these large VHD files back and forth between environments. Next is Dynamic Environment Manager. And again, this can help with personalization of the environment, but it has some really great advanced capabilities like allowing you to elevate privileges for a standard user to be able to install specific approved software into their non-persistent virtual machines. And again, allow you to persist that between session to session. Folder redirection. This is a relatively straightforward, time-tested, easy-to-manage technology that abstracts the actual user data from the non-persistent virtual machine, puts it out on shares that are easy to manage, backup, restore as needed. And finally, app volumes. Here we can leverage app volumes to manage the lifecycle of applications independent of the OS, reducing our image sprawl, and optionally, we can capture for those users that need it, the user-installed applications in a writable volume. Now, I want to note here that 3 of these technologies all require little more than a Windows file share. So again, while the model looks a bit complex in a graphic, you can see how using relatively simple technology, we can get granular management at each one of these different levels, providing the best possible experience. Now, here is just one example. We don't have time, of course, to talk through all the different examples, and you can go check these out in the document. But this is one sort of example of one of the migration scenarios. So you can see in this one, we're going from persona management to Dynamic Environment Manager plus folder redirection and the FSLogix Office Container. So in this particular scenario, we're proposing an in-place migration. What that means is we'll actually leave persona management in place. We implement these additional technologies, and behind the scenes, the data is moved between the systems, essentially copied. And once everything is migrated to the new technology, we simply turn the old off. And this is the type of information we outline in that modernizing document. Each one of the different scenarios has sort of a workflow like this. We'll provide guidance on whether it's an in place or automated, or maybe there's some manual steps, and break down all the different things you'll need to do. Now, additional thing I'd like to call out here is that this particular scenario does rely on what we call copy persona extras.ps1. This is just one of the sample PowerShell scripts that we've included to help make your migration more smooth. This is not a requirement. This is not a supported tool. These are simply code snippets that we've put together, we've tested in our labs and with a number of customers that are already down this path, and you're able to take those and tweak them to your needs. So with that, I'd like to conclude by saying one more time, please check out techzone.vmware.com. All the assets that I showed you here today are available to you for free. You can create an account if you choose to do so, which will allow you access to some additional capability within the platform. But essentially, this is a repository or one-stop shop for everything VMware end user computing. We have everything from what's new videos to technical feature walkthroughs, best practices, the reference architecture, this migration document, and much more. And with that, I thank you for your time and look forward to working with you again.